Hello everyone. Kindly hit the subscribe button on your screen and let me know where you're watching from in the comments. The words hung in the air like smoke, my own voice echoing back at me in the sudden silence of the charity gala. I hadn't meant to say it so loudly, hadn't meant to say it at all, really, but 3 glasses of champagne and the frustration of another failed relationship had loosened my tongue. Now, 50 pairs of eyes were fixed on me, including his. Those ice blue eyes that seemed to cut right through the designer dress I'd spent too much money on, through the carefully constructed persona I presented to the world, straight to the wounded, vulnerable woman beneath. Care to test that theory, Dr. Williams? Alexander Reed, tech billionaire, philanthropist, the man whose foundation was funding half the medical research projects at my hospital, and apparently the man who just heard me tell my best friend that white men fundamentally lack the passion, the rhythm, the emotional intelligence to truly please a black woman. I should have been mortified, should have apologized, backtracked, made some excuse about the champagne. Instead, I lifted my chin and met his gaze directly. Some theories aren't worth testing, Mr. Reed. I've collected enough data already. The crowd around us shifted uncomfortably. Someone coughed. My friend Jasmine gripped my arm, a silent plea to stop before I tanked my career. But something in his expression, not anger, not offense, but a kind of amused challenge, kept me rooted to the spot. He moved through the crowd with the easy confidence of someone who'd never had doors closed in his face, who'd never been told to speak more softly, dress more conservatively, be less intimidating, who'd never been mistaken for the nurse instead of the neurosurgeon. When he reached me, he leaned in close, his cologne expensive but subtle. I braced myself for whatever cutting remark he might deliver, preparing counterarguments in my head. Instead, his lips brushed my ear, his voice low enough that only I could hear. "Try me." Just 2 words, but they sent an electric current down my spine that I hadn't felt in years. Not since. No, I wouldn't think about Derek now. Wouldn't think about how he'd promised forever, then left when my career started outshining his. "Dr. Williams, Imani," Reed continued, stepping back slightly, his expression serious now. "May I have this dance?" I should have said no, should have protected myself from whatever game this was, but something in those blue eyes, a vulnerability beneath the confidence, perhaps, made me place my hand in his. "One dance," I said, ignoring Jasmine's wide-eyed stare. "And it's Dr. Williams to you." His smile was slow, genuine. "Of course. My apologies, Dr. Williams." On the dance floor, his hand rested lightly at my waist, respectful but firm. When was the last time a man had touched me with such certainty, such presence? He moved with unexpected grace, leading without dominating. "You're wondering if I'm offended," he said as we moved across the floor, other couples giving us space. "I'm wondering why you're not," I replied honestly. "Because I'm curious about what experiences led you to that conclusion." His eyes held mine, no judgment in them. "And because assumptions based on race rarely hold up under scrutiny, something I imagine you know all too well." That stopped me short. He was right, of course. How many times had I fought against assumptions about my abilities, my intelligence, my worth, all based on nothing more than my skin color? And yet here I was, doing the same thing. "Fair point," I conceded. "Though my conclusion isn't based on assumptions, it's based on experience." "With all due respect, Dr. Williams, your experience can't possibly include all white men." His hand tightened slightly at my waist as he guided me through a turn. "Just as my experience with brilliant neurosurgeons is limited, though I've met several." I found myself smiling despite my determination not to. "Touché." "Tell me about your work," he said, changing the subject with such smoothness I almost missed the transition. "I've read your papers on neural regeneration after trauma. Groundbreaking stuff." I blinked in surprise. Most men I dated, most people, period, glazed over when I talked about my research. They wanted the prestige of dating a doctor without the reality of what that entailed. "You've read my research." "All of it. It's why I insisted your hospital be included in this year's funding cycle, though I didn't expect to meet you like this." His smile turned wry. I had imagined something a bit more formal, less challenging. The music was winding down, but I found myself reluctant to leave the circle of his arms. There was something disarming about him, something that made me want to lower the defenses I'd spent years constructing. I should apologize, I said finally. My comment was inappropriate and unfair. No apology necessary. His hand slid from my waist as the music ended, but he kept hold of my fingers. Though I would like to continue our conversation, perhaps over dinner. Warning bells sounded in my head. Alexander Reed was exactly the kind of man I'd sworn to avoid, wealthy, powerful, used to getting his way. The kind who saw black women as exotic adventures, not equals, not partners. I don't think that would be wise, I said, withdrawing my hand from his. Professional boundaries and all that. Ah, something flickered across his face, disappointment perhaps. Of course, I respect that completely. He reached into his jacket, pulled out a business card, and offered it to me. If you change your mind, or if you'd like to discuss your research further, please call. Anytime. I took the card, intending to be polite to toss it away later. But as our fingers brushed, I felt that same electric shock. Saw in his eyes a depth that contradicted everything I thought I knew about men like him. Thank you for the dance, Dr. Williams, he said softly. It was educational. As he walked away, Jasmine materialized at my side, practically vibrating with excitement. Girl, what just happened? Alexander Reed himself asked you to dinner and you said no. Are you having a stroke? Should I, as your friend, be checking you for signs of neurological distress? I stared at the card in my hand, embossed with his name and a private number. Not his assistant's, his. It wouldn't work, Jas, I said, though I tucked the card into my clutch instead of the nearest trash can. Men like him don't understand women like me. Men like him, she echoed. Brilliant, gorgeous billionaires who read medical journals for fun and look at you like you're the answer to every question they've ever had. I rolled my eyes, but I couldn't completely suppress my smile. You're ridiculous. And you, she countered, are afraid. The great Dr. Imani Williams, who cuts into human brains for a living, is afraid of what might happen if she lets someone in again. Before I could respond, my phone buzzed. A text message from an unknown number. I meant what I said. Try me, not just in the way you're thinking. Give me a chance to know your mind. The rest will follow. AR. I stared at the screen, heart pounding. How had he got my number? And why did the idea of seeing him again send both fear and anticipation coursing through my veins? Everything okay? Jasmine asked, peering at my expression. I switched off my phone screen and took a steadying breath. I don't know yet, I answered honestly, but I think I'm about to find out. As I looked across the room, I found those blue eyes still watching me, waiting, challenging. And for the first time in years, I wondered if maybe, just maybe, I'd been wrong. 3 days passed. 3 days of me staring at that text message, typing responses and deleting them before I could press send. 3 days of distraction during surgeries that demanded my complete focus. 3 days of Jasmine texting hourly. Have you called him yet? I hadn't, but that didn't mean I hadn't thought about it, about him. Dr. Williams? My resident's voice pulled me back to the present, to the MRI scans displayed on the monitor. Should we proceed with the temporal approach? I studied the glioblastoma invading my patient's brain, forcing my mind back to where it belonged. No, we'll go parietal, less risk to language centers. I pointed to the area. See how it's extending here. The young doctor nodded, but I could tell he was curious about my distraction. Dr. Williams was never distracted. Dr. Williams was legend for her focus, her precision, for being the woman who could remove a tumor others deemed inoperable without so much as blinking. Mrs. Patterson has 2 young children, I added, as if explaining my caution. We can't risk aphasia. After rounds, I retreated to my office, closing the door and leaning against it. The space was Spartan, medical journals stacked neatly, a few framed diplomas, a single photo of my parents at my medical school graduation. No plants, no personal touches, nothing that couldn't be packed in an hour if necessary. I'd learned that lesson when Derek left. When I'd come home from a 36-hour shift to find half our apartment emptied, his goodbye note as clinical as one of my operative reports. We want different things. I need someone more present, someone who puts our relationship first. The message had been clear. I could be Dr. Imani Williams, brilliant neurosurgeon, or I could be the kind of woman men stayed for. Not both. My phone buzzed again. Jasmine, no doubt. But when I glanced at the screen, the text was from him. I'm speaking at the Medical Innovation Conference tomorrow. Thought you might be interested. No pressure, just science. AR. Science, safe territory. No expectations of dinner or dancing or whatever else that try me had implied. Just two brilliant minds sharing ideas. I could handle that. I'll be there, I replied before I could talk myself out of it. Professional curiosity only. His response came seconds later, of course. Though I remain curious about many things, Dr. Williams, see you at 2 p.m., 4th floor auditorium. The next day, I chose my outfit with more care than I was willing to admit. The charcoal pantsuit projected authority, professionalism. The deep purple silk blouse beneath, my mother always said it brought out the warmth in my dark skin, was my only concession to vanity. I slipped into the back of the auditorium just as Alexander took the stage. Gone was the tuxedo from the gala, replaced by dark jeans and a dove-gray button-down, sleeves rolled to expose forearms corded with subtle strength. Less formal, yet somehow no less commanding. The future of medicine isn't in treating disease, he was saying, his voice carrying effortlessly. It's in predicting and preventing it. Imagine neural implants that can detect the earliest signs of dementia, not in 5 years, but now. Today. I leaned forward despite myself. This was precisely the direction my own research was heading. My company has developed a prototype, he continued, clicking to display a schematic. A biocompatible implant that monitors neural activity in real time, detecting patterns that precede plaque formation years before symptoms appear. Murmurs rippled through the audience. If what he was describing worked, it would revolutionize treatment for millions. But I had questions, serious ones about bioethics, about data privacy, about who would have access to this technology. As if reading my mind, he addressed each concern in turn, outlining stringent privacy protocols and a sliding scale of costs to ensure accessibility across socioeconomic lines. The greatest medical innovations are worthless if only the privileged can benefit, he said, his gaze sweeping the room and pausing briefly when it found mine. Healthcare equity isn't just an ideal, it's a moral imperative. The words could have sounded rehearsed, performative, but they didn't. They rang with the same conviction I brought to my operating room, to the pro bono cases I took on despite administrative resistance. After his talk, I lingered, watching as he fielded questions with patience and precision. No deflection, no corporate doublespeak. When the crowd finally thinned, he spotted me and made his way over, his expression warming. Dr. Williams, you came. Your research aligns with mine, I said, aiming for professional detachment despite the flutter in my chest. Though I have concerns about the interface design, the temporal placement risks. Damage to the facial nerve, he finished. Yes, we've been working on that, actually. He glanced at his watch. I have the prototype in my lab upstairs. I'd value your opinion if you have time. Professional, scientific, no subtext. So why did it feel like so much more was being offered? I have surgery in 2 hours, I said. Plenty of time. His smile was brief but genuine. I promise to have you back with time to spare. Against my better judgment, I followed him to the elevator. As we rode up in silence, I found myself studying his profile, the determined set of his jaw, the tiny lines at the corner of his eye that suggested he smiled often, the single gray hair at his temple that somehow only enhanced his appeal. You're starring, Dr. Williams, he said without looking at me, the barest hint of amusement in his voice. I'm observing, I corrected. It's what surgeons do. And what do you observe? The elevator doors opened before I could answer, revealing a laboratory that would make any research scientist weep with envy. Floor to ceiling, windows offered a panoramic view of the city, but it was the technology that caught my breath. Equipment I'd only read about, prototypes years ahead of what was publicly available. This is impressive, I admitted, running my fingers over a neural mapping interface that had to cost more than my annual salary. The prototype is this way, he said, leading me to a workstation where a device no larger than a grain of rice sat under a microscope. I peered through the lens, examining the intricate design. The neural leads are too rigid, I said immediately. They'll cause microtrauma with normal brain pulsation. Instead of defensiveness, he nodded thoughtfully. That's exactly the problem we've been trying to solve. What would you suggest? A hydrogel coating, something that mimics brain tissue elasticity. I straightened, finding him closer than I expected, those blue eyes focused intently on me. Brilliant, he said softly. Simple, elegant, and completely obvious now that you've said it. Sometimes it takes an outside perspective. Is that what you are, Dr. Williams? Outside? His question carried weight beyond the professional context. I'm not sure where I stand with you, I admitted, surprising myself with my honesty. He took a step closer, close enough that I could see the varying shades of blue in his irises, the slight unevenness of his stubble. Where would you like to stand? The air between us seemed to crackle with possibility, with danger. I thought of all the reasons this was a bad idea, the professional complications, the personal risk, the fact that we came from worlds so different they might as well be separate planets. I should go, I said, stepping back. My surgery. Of course. He didn't try to stop me, but his eyes held mine. But before you do, have dinner with me tonight. No expectations, just conversation. Why? The question escaped before I could stop it. Why me? Why not someone easier, less complicated? His laugh was unexpected, rich and genuine. Because easier has never interested me. Because you challenged my assumptions before you even knew my name. Because you look at my billion-dollar prototype and immediately see how to make it better. He paused. And because when we danced, I felt something I haven't felt in a very long time. What's that? I barely recognized my own voice, so soft and uncertain. Possibility, he answered simply. The word hung between us, an offering without pressure, a door without obligation to walk through it. I can't do dinner, I said finally. I have back-to-back surgeries until 9. His face remained neutral, accepting. I understand. But, I continued, surprising myself, I haven't eaten since yesterday. I could use breakfast tomorrow. The words felt like jumping off a cliff, exhilarating and terrifying all at once. His smile was slow, transformative. Breakfast, he repeated, as if testing the word. I know just the place, 7 too early. Make it 6:30, I said, moving toward the elevator. I have rounds at 8. 6:30 it is. As the elevator doors closed between us, I exhaled shakily, wondering what I'd just set in motion. My phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. Dr. Williams, this is Claire Reed, Alexander's sister. We need to talk before your breakfast tomorrow. There are things you should know. Meet me tonight. I stared at the message, a cold weight settling in my stomach. Just when I'd begun to think maybe, just maybe, Alexander Reed was different from what I'd assumed, was this confirmation that I'd been right to be wary all along. The cafe Claire had chosen was deliberately public, a bustling spot near the hospital where residents and attending physicians often grabbed coffee between shifts. A place where I'd be comfortable, but where our conversation would be masked by the ambient noise of espresso machines and medical chatter. I spotted her immediately, though we'd never met. The resemblance to Alexander was striking, the same piercing blue eyes, the same confident posture. But where his confidence seemed earned, hers felt inherited, a birthright rather than a journey. Dr. Williams, she said. Rising as I approached, no smile, just assessment. Thank you for meeting me. Your text was intriguing, I replied, sliding into the seat across from her, though I'm not sure what we have to discuss. She pushed a cup toward me. Black coffee, 1 sugar. Alexander mentioned it's how you take it. The fact that he'd noticed, that he'd mentioned it to his sister, sent an unexpected warmth through me. I tamped it down, reminding myself why I was here. What things should I know about your brother, Ms. Reed? She studied me for a moment longer, then reached into her designer bag and pulled out a small photo album. First, call me Claire. Second, she slid the album across the table. This is Elise. I opened the cover and found myself looking at a stunning black woman with a brilliant smile, wrapped in Alexander's arms. They stood before the Eiffel Tower, both laughing, both radiant with happiness. His wife, Claire said quietly. She died 3 years ago, brain aneurysm. The revelation hit me with physical force. I'm sorry, I managed, turning the page to see more photos. Alexander and Elise at their wedding, on a yacht, building a sandcastle with a small child. Their daughter, Zoe, Claire explained, watching my reaction. She's 6 now. I looked up sharply. He has a daughter. He has everything. A daughter he adores, more money than God, and a brilliant mind that never stops working. Her voice held no emotion I could decipher. What he doesn't have is the ability to move on. Not really. I closed the album, suddenly understanding. You think I'm a replacement. Aren't you? Her question was direct, challenging. Brilliant black neurosurgeon just like Elise, the resemblance is uncanny. The coffee turned bitter on my tongue. Of course. It made perfect sense now, his interest in my research, his immediate attraction. I wasn't a Manny to him. I was a ghost. I appreciate your candor, I said, pushing back from the table. I won't waste any more of your brother's time. Sit down, Dr. Williams, Claire said, her tone making it clear she was accustomed to being obeyed. I'm not finished. Against my better judgment, I sat. Did Alexander tell you how we met Elise? I shook my head. She saved my life. Claire's composure cracked slightly. I had a seizure at a charity event, collapsed right in the middle of a speech about urban education. Very dramatic. Elise was there. She recognized it wasn't just stress or dehydration. Insisted on a CT scan that everyone else thought was unnecessary. She touched the side of her head, where I now noticed a faint scar partially hidden by her hairline. Grade II meningioma. Would have killed me within a year if she hadn't caught it. She performed your surgery, I guessed. Claire nodded, and became family in the process. Alexander fell for her mind first, the way she spoke about neural pathways like they were constellations, mapping the universe inside our skulls. I recognized the poetry in that description, had used similar metaphors myself when trying to explain my fascination with neurosurgery. After she died, Claire continued, he threw himself into neurotech research, said if the technology had existed to detect Elise's aneurysm before it ruptured, she might still be alive. His prototype is designed to monitor vascular integrity as well as neural activity, I finished, pieces clicking into place. It's not just about dementia. No, she confirmed. It's about Elise, about making sure what happened to her doesn't happen to anyone else. I sat back, processing. This was both better and worse than I'd feared. Not a fetish, but perhaps something equally problematic, a man unable to separate me from the ghost of his wife. Why tell me this? I asked finally. Why not let me have breakfast with him, perhaps date him, before I discovered the truth? Claire's expression softened slightly. Because Zoe asked about you this morning. What? Alexander told her he was having breakfast with a doctor friend. She asked if you were pretty like her mommy. Claire's eyes held mine. My brother hasn't mentioned a woman to his daughter since Elise died, not once in 3 years. The implication hung between us, unexpected and unsettling. I still don't understand why you're telling me this, I said carefully. Because you deserve to know what you're walking into. She gathered her things, preparing to leave. And because my brother deserves someone who sees him for who he is now, not who he was with Elise. And who is he now? I couldn't help asking. Claire paused, considering. A man trying to rebuild himself from ruins, a father doing his best, a genius with a blind spot when it comes to his own heart. She stood. The question, Dr. Williams, is whether you're interested in the man himself or just in proving your theory wrong. With that parting shot, she left me sitting alone with my cooling coffee and churning thoughts. I didn't cancel breakfast. I considered it, typed out the message 3 different times, but something stopped me each time. Perhaps curiosity, perhaps pride, perhaps the memory of how it felt to be in his arms during that dance, when for a moment I'd felt something I'd thought was long dead. So at 6:25 the next morning, I found myself waiting outside a small diner far from the upscale neighborhoods where I'd expected Alexander Reed to take his meals. The place was unassuming, with vinyl booths and waitresses who called everyone Hun. He arrived exactly on time, dressed casually in jeans and a simple button-down, looking more like a college professor than a tech billionaire. When he saw me, his face lit with genuine surprise. "You came," he said, the relief in his voice unmistakable. "Did you think I wouldn't?" His smile turned rueful. "Claire called to tell me about your meeting." I stiffened. "I see." "No," he said gently. "I don't think you do. She called to tell me she'd never seen anyone stand their ground against her quite so impressively. She thinks you're, and I quote, exactly what you need." He held the door open. "Though whether she meant I need you or you need me remains unclear. My sister enjoys being cryptic." The diner was warm, smelling of coffee and bacon. He led me to a booth in the corner, nodding to the waitress who immediately brought 2 cups of coffee. "I come here every Thursday with Zoe," he explained, adding cream to his cup. "Best pancakes in the city." "You have a daughter," I said, not a question. "I do." His eyes met mine, direct and unafraid. "She's the center of my universe." "And her mother was a neurosurgeon." Still not a question. He nodded, his expression solemn. "Elise was extraordinary in every possible way." "Claire thinks I remind you of her." "Claire," he said carefully, "is protective and perceptive and not entirely wrong." He leaned forward. "Yes, you share a profession. Yes, there's a physical resemblance. And yes, when I first saw you at the gala, those similarities caught my attention." The honesty hurt more than I'd expected. I moved to stand, but his hand caught mine, his touch gentle but firm. "But Imani," the use of my first name stopped me. "The woman who called out that entire room with her unfiltered opinion, who challenged me directly, who looked at my life's work and immediately improved it. That woman is entirely herself, and entirely fascinating." The sincerity in his voice held me there, caught between the desire to protect myself and the pull of connection. "I have complications, Alexander," I said finally, settling back into my seat. "My career comes first, always. It's cost me relationships before." "I understand career commitment," he replied. "And I have my own complications, a daughter who will always be my priority, a company that demands attention, and yes, a past that shaped me." He paused. "But I'd like to explore the possibility of something uncomplicated between us. Breakfast, conversation, 2 people getting to know each other without expectations." "Just breakfast." I couldn't help the skepticism in my voice. His smile was slow, a hint of that original challenge returning to his eyes. "For now, though I still stand by my original offer." "Which was?" "Try me," he said softly, and the same electric current I'd felt at the gala ran through me again. "Not just in the way you initially thought. Try trusting me. Try letting me know you. The rest." His fingers brushed mine lightly across the table. "The rest can wait until you're ready." The waitress appeared with plates of pancakes, breaking the moment. As she set them down, my pager went off, an emergency at the hospital. "I have to go," I said, already calculating how quickly I could get there. "Of course." No disappointment, just understanding. He stood when I did. "Same time next week." I hesitated at the crossroads of caution and courage, of past wounds and future possibilities. "Yes," I said finally, "but not here." "Where then?" "My place," I answered, surprising myself. "I make better pancakes." His smile was worth the risk in those words. I look forward to testing that theory, Dr. Williams. As I rushed toward the hospital, my phone buzzed with a text. Thank you for giving me a chance. For what it's worth, Claire also said one other thing, that you look at me nothing like Elise did. You see me clearer, sharper, no rose-colored glasses. I find I prefer that clarity. AR. For the first time in years, I felt the walls I'd built around my heart begin to crack. Just slightly. Just enough to let in the possibility that maybe, just maybe, this time could be different. Weeks blended into months. Breakfasts became dinners. Text messages became phone calls that stretched into the night. Careful distance became a closeness I hadn't allowed myself in years. Alexander was nothing like I'd expected. He insisted on cooking for me as often as I cooked for him. He listened, truly listened, when I spoke about my research, asking questions that pushed my thinking in new directions. He never complained when surgeries ran long or when I had to cancel plans at the last minute. Instead, he'd leave containers of homemade soup outside my apartment door with notes that made me smile despite my exhaustion. "You're falling for him," Jasmine said one evening as we shared wine in my living room, now softened by throw pillows and framed photos that hadn't been there before. Including one of Alexander and me at a medical conference, both of us intense over some point of neuroscience, neither aware the photo was being taken. "I'm considering possibilities," I hedged, though the warmth spreading through me at the mere thought of him belied my caution. "Girl, please," Jasmine rolled her eyes. "You reorganized your closet to make room for his jacket. The Alexander I met 6 months ago wouldn't have left so much as a toothbrush here." She was right. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, I'd been letting him in. Not just into my space, but into the carefully guarded chambers of my heart. But one wall remained firmly in place. I still hadn't met Zoe. Alexander never pushed, understanding my hesitation. "She's been through so much," he'd explained. "I need to know this is substantial before I introduce someone new into her life." The unspoken question hung between us. Was what we had substantial? Was it built to last? The answer came unexpectedly on a rainy Tuesday when my last surgery was canceled. I'd texted Alexander on impulse, "Free evening. Dinner." His reply was immediate. "At the Children's Science Museum with Zoe. Her favorite place. Join us." I stared at the message, heart pounding. This was it, the threshold I'd been afraid to cross. Meeting his daughter meant acknowledging that whatever was happening between us wasn't casual, wasn't temporary. On my way, I texted back before I could overthink it. The museum was nearly empty on the rainy weeknight. I found them in the neuroscience exhibit, Alexander kneeling beside a small girl with copper-brown curls as she peered into a model of the human brain. "That's where memories live," she was saying, pointing to the hippocampus with surprising accuracy. "Daddy says that's where I keep Mommy." "That's exactly right, sweetheart," Alexander replied, his voice gentle. "And no one can ever take those memories away from you." My throat tightened at the tenderness between them. At the careful way, he nurtured both her scientific curiosity and her connection to her mother. He must have sensed my presence because he turned, his eyes lighting when they found mine. "Imani," he said, her name a welcome on his lips. The little girl turned too, studying me with intelligence beyond her years. I saw Elise in her features, the shape of her eyes, the curve of her smile. But there was Alexander there too, in the thoughtful tilt of her head. "Your daddy's doctor friend," she said matter-of-factly. "He said you fix people's brains." I knelt to her level, offering my hand. "That's right, I'm Dr. Williams, but you can call me Imani if you'd like." She shook my hand with adorable formality. "I'm Zoe Reed, I'm 6 3/4. She pointed back at the brain model. "Do you really know all the parts?" "I do," I confirmed. "Would you like me to show you?" Her eager nod launched us into an impromptu anatomy lesson, with Alexander watching in silence as his daughter peppered me with questions that would challenge most medical students. When she finally ran ahead to the next exhibit, he reached for my hand. "Thank you," he said softly. "She's remarkable," I replied honestly. You've done an amazing job with her. We have, he corrected. Elise and I, his fingers tightened around mine. She'd like you, Imani, not because you're similar, but because you're exactly who you are. The honesty in his voice, the absence of guilt or comparison, loosened something tight within me. For the first time, I fully believed that he saw me, not a replacement, not a theory to be tested, but me. That night changed everything. I began spending weekends with them, making pancakes on Saturday mornings, helping with Zoe's science projects, falling asleep on Alexander's shoulder during movie nights. I found myself looking forward to these quiet domestic moments as much as our more passionate ones, when he would prove, with devastating thoroughness, how wrong my original assessment had been. But the universe has a way of testing happiness, just as it begins to feel secure. It came in the form of a hospital board meeting where the chief of surgery announced a new partnership. Reed Neurotechnologies will be providing exclusive funding for our brain mapping initiative. Murmurs rippled through the room. The initiative was my brainchild, my research, my passion project. But I'd heard nothing about Reed Tech's involvement. This will allow us to fast-track the clinical trials, the chief continued, thanks to Dr. Williams' personal connection to Mr. Reed. The implication hung heavily in the air, that I had used my relationship to secure funding, that my professional achievement was now tainted by personal favoritism. I sat frozen as colleagues' eyes turned toward me, some curious, some envious, some openly suspicious. Everything I'd worked for, every barrier I'd broken as a Black woman in neurosurgery, suddenly felt undermined. I found Alexander waiting outside my office after the meeting, his expression concerned. You heard, he said, not a question. How could you do this? I demanded, ushering him inside and closing the door. Without discussing it with me first. The board approached me, he explained. They said you'd been briefed, that you'd approved. Well, I wasn't, and I didn't. My voice shook with anger and hurt. Do you have any idea what this looks like? What people will say, that I slept my way to funding? His face paled. Imani, no, that's not. Do you know how hard I've worked? I continued, unable to stop. How many times I've had to be twice as good, twice as careful to get half the recognition. And now, my voice broke, now it looks like I took shortcuts. I'll withdraw the funding, he said immediately. I'll make a statement clarifying. That's not the point, I cried. The point is that you didn't think about how this would affect me professionally. The point is that your privilege lets you move through the world without considering consequences that I have to navigate every day. His silence told me he understood, finally, what I was saying, what had always separated us beyond race or wealth or circumstance. I'm sorry, he said finally, the words weighted with genuine regret. You're right, I didn't think, I just wanted to help. I don't need help, Alexander, I need respect. I sank into my chair, suddenly exhausted. Maybe this was a mistake, maybe we're too different after all. Don't say that, he said, kneeling beside my chair, his eyes level with mine. Please, we can fix this. Some things can't be fixed with money or influence, I said softly. Some things need time and understanding and change. Then give me the chance to change, he pleaded, to understand, to be better. Before I could answer, my phone rang, the emergency line from the OR. Dr. Williams, I answered, professional instinct taking over. The voice on the other end was urgent. Multiple vehicle collision, 6-year-old female with severe head trauma, ETA 5 minutes. As I hung up, Alexander's face showed he'd heard enough to understand. Go, he said. We'll finish this later. I gathered my surgical kit, already mentally preparing for what awaited me. At the door, I paused, looking back at him. Alexander. I know, he said softly. Duty calls. It's one of the things I love about you. The word hung between us. Love, spoken so casually yet with such certainty. I had no time to respond, to examine how it made me feel. There was a child who needed me. It wasn't until I was scrubbing in, preparing to open a young girl's skull and fight for her life, that I realized something with crystal clarity. I loved him too, despite our differences, despite my fears, despite everything. The question was whether love alone would be enough to bridge the worlds between us. 13 hours. That's how long I stood in the operating room, fighting to save the life of a little girl whose brain had been shattered by impact. 13 hours of precision, of split-second decisions, of refusing to acknowledge the trembling in my hands when I saw that she had copper-brown curls just like Zoe's. I didn't know if Alexander was still in the hospital. Didn't have time to think about our unfinished conversation or the word that hung between us. All that mattered was the child on my table, the delicate tissue beneath my fingers, the quiet beeping of machines that told me she still had a chance. When I finally emerged, the fluorescent lights of the hallway harsh against my exhausted eyes, I found him there. Slumped in a waiting room chair, head in his hands. He looked up when he heard my footsteps, hope and fear warring in his expression. "She'll live," I said, my voice hoarse from hours of giving precise instructions to my surgical team. "Barring complications, she'll recover, maybe completely." The relief on his face mirrored what I felt in my bones, that fierce, primal satisfaction of having cheated death, of having kept a family whole. "You look ready to collapse," he said, rising to steady me as exhaustion hit like a physical blow. "I'm fine." The words came automatically, the same words I'd been saying for years whenever anyone suggested I might be human, might have limits. "No," he said gently, "you're not, but you're extraordinary." He led me to the doctor's lounge, where he'd somehow arranged for fresh clothes, hot food, and privacy. As I changed out of scrubs stained with a child's blood, as I mechanically ate the meal he'd provided, I felt something shift between us. A new understanding forming in the wake of crisis. "I spoke with the board," he said when I'd finished eating. "Made it clear that my company's funding comes with no strings, no credit to you, and that the decision was made without your knowledge or consent." I looked up, too tired for anger now. "It won't matter. People will still talk." "Let them," he said, an edge to his voice I'd never heard before. "Your work speaks for itself, always has. I was wrong to interfere, even with the best intentions." "It's not just about this," I said, needing him to understand. "It's about all of it, the different worlds we live in, the things you take for granted that I have to fight for, the way people see us together and make assumptions." I paused, gathering my thoughts. "You wanted me to try you, but have you ever really tried to understand me, my reality?" The question hung between us, heavy with implication. "No," he admitted after a long moment. "I haven't, not fully." He leaned forward, his gaze direct. "But I want to, if you'll let me." I studied him, this man who had challenged my assumptions, who had shown me depths I hadn't expected, who still had so much to learn about the world I navigated daily. "I can't be the one to teach you everything, Alexander. That's too much to ask of anyone." "I know." He reached across the table, his fingers stopping just short of mine. "But maybe we can learn together. Maybe that's what love is supposed to be." There it was again, that word, so simple yet so complex. "I said something earlier," he continued when I didn't speak. "Something I meant but didn't plan. I love you, Imani. Not because of who you remind me of, but because of who you are, your brilliance, your determination, even your stubbornness." His smile was tentative. "Especially that, actually." Despite everything, my exhaustion, my lingering hurt, my fear, I felt my lips curve in response. "I'm not stubborn, I'm resolute." "Semantics," he countered, his smile widening. "The point is, I love the woman who just stood for 13 hours saving a child's life, who calls me on my blind spots, who makes my daughter laugh in a way I haven't heard since her mother died." His voice softened. "And I'm willing to do whatever it takes to deserve that woman's love in return." I closed my eyes, feeling tears threaten. When had I last allowed myself to be this vulnerable, this honest? "I'm scared, Alexander, not of you, but of us, of what happens when the novelty wears off, when the differences between us start to matter more than what brings us together." "They already matter," he said, surprising me with his candor. "They always will, but so do we." He finally took my hand, his touch grounding me. "So does this." In that sterile hospital room, with the scent of antiseptic still clinging to my skin, I made a choice. To believe that two people from different worlds could create a new one together. That understanding could grow where ignorance once stood. That love, real love, could be both tender and tough, both healing and challenging. "Okay," I whispered, squeezing his fingers. "I'll try you, really try this time, no more walls." "And I'll try you," he promised. "No more assumptions, no more charging ahead without considering your perspective." I had to smile at that. I give that promise about 3 days. "Such faith," he laughed, the sound warming me from within. "Fine, when I inevitably mess up, I promise to listen, to learn, to do better next time." "That," I said, "I can believe." He helped me to my feet, steadying me when my exhausted body swayed. "Come home with me," he said softly. "Not for anything but sleep. Zoe's with Claire tonight, just let me take care of you for once." The old Amani would have refused, would have insisted on her independence, her self-sufficiency. But the woman I was becoming, the woman who was learning that vulnerability could be strength, simply nodded. 6 months later, I stood in the grand ballroom of the same hotel where our story had begun, Alexander's hand warm at my waist as we swayed to the music. Around us, the annual charity gala was in full swing, but this time I wasn't an outsider looking in. This time I belonged, not because of him, but because my research, funded now through proper channels with full credit to my team, was being honored. "Proud of you, Dr. Williams," he murmured against my ear, his breath sending a familiar shiver down my spine. "Just because my neural mapping technique is being implemented in hospitals nationwide," I teased. "Or because I finally admitted you were right about something." His laugh rumbled through me. Both, though I'm still in shock about the latter. From across the room, I caught Jasmine's eye. She raised her glass in a silent toast, her smile knowing. Beside her stood Claire, who had become an unexpected ally in navigating the complex dynamics of our relationship, of blending families and histories and futures. And at a table near the dance floor, watched over by both sets of grandparents, sat Zoe, now 7 1/4, as she liked to specify. The little girl who had asked me, just last week, if she could call me Mama Amani sometimes, because having 2 mamas means I'm extra lucky. "What are you thinking?" Alexander asked, noticing my distraction. "That I was wrong," I said honestly, "not just about white men and their capabilities." The heat in his eyes told me he remembered exactly what I'd said that night, but about possibilities, about what happens when you let someone in. "Care to elaborate on that first point, Dr. Williams?" His voice dropped lower, private despite the crowded room. "I seem to recall a very specific theory you once had." I leaned closer, my lips brushing his ear as I whispered words that made his pupils dilate, his fingers tighten at my waist. Words that promised we wouldn't stay at this gala much longer. As he led me from the dance floor with barely concealed urgency, I caught a glimpse of our reflection in the ballroom's mirrored walls. A black woman in emerald silk, her head held high. A white man whose eyes never left her face, as if she were the answer to every question he'd ever asked. Different worlds, yes, but the same universe, the same heart. And as we slipped away from the crowd, his lips finding mine in the privacy of the elevator, I thanked whatever fate or chance or divine intervention had allowed me to hear those 2 words that had changed everything. "Try me." And so our story ends where it began, with a challenge accepted and a love that transcends expectations. I hope you've enjoyed this journey with Amani and Alexander as they navigated the complexities of race, privilege, professional boundaries, and ultimately, the courage it takes to truly see and be seen by another. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe for more tales that explore the beautiful complexities of modern relationships. Your comments mean the world to me. I'd love to hear which moments resonated with you most, or what you imagine for Amani, Alexander, and Zoe's future together. Thank you for being part of their journey.